Hilchos Melochim Perek Yud Halacha Beis. Benoach she'on soil onos la'avoy alachas mitzvosot. He was forced by a strong-armed person to transgress one of the commandments of a Benoach, of a non-Jew. And mutaloi la'avoy, he can transgress afilu nenas la'avoy avodah zorah, even if he was forced to serve idols. Ovid, he does so even though by Israel there are three sins which one may not transgress even under pain of death. Now, the avodah zorah, and these three are idol worship, murder, and also aroyos, immorality. Even if they forced him, he's not liable. And he can do so. They do not have this concept of Kiddush Hashem. Because the Mishnah cites in Sanhedrin, they asked from Ami, Menoach is mitzvah on Kiddush Hashem, I'm sanctifying the name of Hashem. Oh, Avad Bahava. Avad Bahava said, Ksiv ben Amon sa'atzva Arom. It says by Naaman, the head of the army of Arom, Shalisha Anovi Rifeu. Elisha Novi healed him from his leprosy. And Naaman accepted not to serve idols. He said Melochim Beis, chapter 5, verse 18. To this thing God should forgive me, to this your servant, when I come to Beis Rimoy. There is the name of an idol worship. Then the king is leaning on my hand, and I bowed to him against my will, because my master was bowing and resting on my hand. So it seems you're permitted to do so when he's forced to do so. He doesn't have to give his soul up for Kiddush Hashem. Elisha agreed with him. Elisha told him in verse 19, "Go in peace." Benoach would be forbidden to go on Kiddush Hashem. It would be obligated to go on Kiddush Hashem, and be forbidden to do idol worship even under the pain of death. How did Elisha say to him, "Go in peace," which means he agreed with him. And even though there is no mitzvah to admonish a goy, that's only by a Jew, as it says in Vayikra 19, verse 17, shall you admonish your fellow Jew, but why did he admit to him that it's okay? And the Gemara says there's a difference between whether it was done publicly or privately. Rashi explains, Naaman did it in private, and there were no 10 of Jews that saw him bow in the house of Rimoy. The Kiddush Hashem is only amongst Jews, and even if Bnei Noach is not commanded to do Kiddush Hashem among Jews, only among Goyim, only among Jews. Because the Mishnah says that Rambam had a text, and if the case was that they were obligated to give their life, let him say, Elisha should have told him that B'tzini is permitted, but public Yuv is forbidden. And Taisus also agreed to this text, because according to Rashi, the question was something that wasn't determined. From the text that we have of the Gemara, it seems that it was determined that there's a difference between public or private. And from here, the Rambam learned that Benoach is never commanded on Kiddush Hashem, because Elisha did not tell him the difference between public and private. Seva HaMitzvahs, he says, there's Rambam writes in Mitzvahs say 9, positive commandment 9, he commanded us to sanctify the Lord's name. And it says, "V'nigdashti b'sech b'nei Yisrael," I shall be sanctified within the children of Israel. That's the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. Where all of Bnei Yisrael in general are commanded, and to give his life because of his love for Hashem and his belief in his oneness of Hashem, like Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The more questions. Benoach is mitzvah on Kiddush Hashem, or he's not commanded. Toshma, come in here. 7 mitzvahs Benoach was commanded. If the mitzvah on Kiddush Hashem, so there's an 8th one. We counted all the 7. The Maggid Mishnah questions that the Gemara says there's no proof from that. The eighth mitzvah, it could be Benoach's command on sanctifying God's name. Rambam says it's not in the particulars, because every one of the 7 mitzvahs has also the obligation of giving their life for it, because of sanctifying God's name, because by a goy it's always death, and therefore there's no reason to consider it an 8th separate mitzvah. It's a subdivision within the categories, within the 7. Therefore, he explains according to Rambam, since it was concluded that a Ben Noach is not obligated to sanctify God's name, it must be we're not concerned with Rava's refutation. In the Halacha, Kiddush Hashem is not considered a subheading of the 7 mitzvahs, and we're not commanded, and they are not commanded on Kiddush Hashem. Therefore, the Rambam says, even if they forced him, he may do so. If they forced him, he may do so. He's not liable. Now, is it Ben Noach mutter to kill somebody else if they forced him to murder somebody else? The Maggid Mishnah Havagia, so the Mishnah Lamelech, cites from the Peirush HaMeir, who explains that by spilling blood, a Ben Noach is commanded not to kill anyone else, even under pain of death. Why? Because we learn it by Yisrael from a logic. How do you know that your blood is more sweeter than somebody else's blood? Maybe your friend's blood is sweeter. And this logic applies to not only Yisrael, but also to Ben Noach. And we prove this from Rae Gann Mizrahi in Parshas Vayishlach. The Tevis Goyma infers in the Rambam that even if he's forced to do idol worship, that he didn't differentiate, because he doesn't say, but murder he cannot do. Therefore, we have seen that all 3 of the terrible sins that a Jew is required to give his life for, a Ben Noach can transgress and not be killed. The Maskil of David, who is of David Pardo, says, "My Chos Domidoch Sumak Tzvei" is only said by Yisrael, that his soul is very beloved by Hashem. Therefore, if he comes to ask a question, to kill or not to kill, then we ask him, what are you asking? You know that by Kodesh Baruch Hu, the soul of Yisrael is very special. Therefore, you are not allowed to do so. But here, even if we push off the mitzvah, a Jew will be killed, and you question, maybe your friend's life is worth more before Hashem, because they force you to kill him. Therefore, we say, how do you see that your blood is thicker than the other Jews? But Ben Noach, there's no sorrow that one person is more beloved by the other, and therefore by death, murder, the din is that there's no reason to make differentiations, and therefore he can murder. As it would seem to be inferred from the Rambam's language, it doesn't say that when he kills somebody else, if he was forced to do so, he is forbidden. It doesn't say it's forbidden. A goy who murders to save his life by he transgressing one of the 7 mitzvahs. So Akiva Eiger cites the Tevis Goyma questions of Ben Noach that wants to save himself by eating Evim and Achai. It's forbidden for Yisrael to give him Evim and Achai, because of Achai Bohem is a source by Yisrael. Yisrael can sin in order to save his life, except for the 3 stringent, the 3 main sins of idol worship, murder, and immorality. That's only said by Yisrael. Ben Noach, it wasn't permitted to heal one of the 7 mitzvahs when there's even a life-threatening, because you're not allowed to place before a blind person a stumbling block. This distinguishes between they force him to do a sin, or he wants to save himself by doing the sin. In the second situation, there's no concept of a chai b'hem, and you should not die with them. like the Tevis Goyma said. And he says, from the Rambam, there's no proof, we cannot determine if a goy can transgress on one of the 7 mitzvahs to save his life. In Chuvas Orosh, he writes that you do not punish a minor until he becomes 13 years old in one day, and we know that he's an adult. It's Halacha Moshe Sinai in that what we consider an adult. Some Soiva questions, since the measures, this system of adulthood doesn't apply to goyim, so therefore the law that a minor is not liable with mitzvahs it takes effect also just by a Yisrael and not by a goy. And he explains that Ben Noach is liable for mitzvahs. When it says in the Rambam that you don't punish a Ben Noach when he's a child, is talking about that he doesn't have intelligence. But a Kohen who's sharp, he does understand, you would punish him, even though by Yisrael he would not be punished. The Hilchos Shlomo points out from the Rambam that Ben Noach, who is deaf mute, is not liable for any commandments, even if he is intelligent, like the Chassam Sofer regarding a minor who is not yet, meaning somebody who's not intelligent. Because what the Rambam writes, that you don't punish a Ben Noach who is a deaf mute, an imbecile, or a minor. And in that same halacha, he writes that Ben Noach, that they forced him to transgress, and he did not permit himself to be killed. He is not liable. So we see there's a condition between there's a connection between these thoughts. In Shuvas Yudei, he cites that to the one who questioned, it was definitely simple that a imbecile is not liable because he does it unwittingly. And the Rambam learns this, that since a deaf mute and an imbecile and a minor are brought together with the idea that a goy who's been forced, these two categories are not liable. That's the same reasoning, because they're not obligated. He brings to Tanah Be'elio that an imbecile they took from him his wisdom and his intelligence. He's considered like an animal, a wild animal, a bird, and other creatures the Kodesh Baruch created. So we see that they're not considered man, and just like they limited man and not a minor, so we have a limited man and not a mute, deaf mute, an imbecile, and a minor. In the drushes, and we read Ushmaltem Sukoisam Zipota Ashayasa Oisom Adam Vachaibohem. We learn the posuk in Vayikra 18:5 that you should keep my commandments, my laws, and that a person means Adam, and not somebody who's forced. Means that an imbecile and a deaf mute and a minor are not included, and therefore the Rambam includes that Ben Noach, an imbecile and a mute and a minor are part from a mitzvahs, together with the din of onus that's not punished. He adds that from the commentaries on the Rambam do not cite a source why Ben Noach and a deaf mute and an idiot and a minor are not liable. But the Rambam is, of course, with his opinion in Perek Tes Halacha Yudalad, that the people of Shechem were obligated to be put to death by law, because Shechem stole Dinah, and they knew about it, and they did not judge them, and they didn't. And Bnei Yaakov did not kill the minors. So from this we see that Ben Noach Kohen is not punished. And he pushes this off, that they didn't kill the minors because they cannot be judged, just like they didn't kill the women, because they cannot judge others. In other words, they cannot judge others, and therefore they're not included in the fault of not judging. Mine by other, maybe, but it could be by other commandments, even minors would be liable. Therefore, he says the Rambam relied on the words that he said at the beginning of the parak. He says, somebody who says it's permitted, and he is considered unintentional, but nearly like intentional. If a Menoyach, he would be liable. She should have learned what the laws are, and he didn't learn. But Menoyach, who is unintentional, which is close to oinus, which means being against his will, like an imbecile, he's not liable, even though he doesn't need warning. That's just like when he kills intentionally. And according to this, we don't require warning. According to this, a goy who's a minor, he's liable only. You can say that only when you can say to him, he should have learned. But if you can't say that to him, he's not liable. Meaning, even if they'll explain it to him, he won't understand what's the matter. He's not liable. For that reason, a deaf mute, an idiot, imbecile, are also not liable. He clarifies that the words of the Rambam here are in reverse from the usual custom of the Rambam. Usually he says Peirush HaMeir. He puts the order as mute, imbecile, and minor. And here he writes minor, mute, and imbecile to teach us that not every minor is not liable, only when his intelligence is limited, and we teach us that even a deaf mute and an imbecile are potter only if they do not have the ability to comprehend. He says further, before 20 years, somebody asked him the question to the Chassam Sofer, and he answered in the same fashion. The Chassam Sofer learned it from the words of the Rambam that somebody who is forced is not liable by Ben Noach, and since the seduction of a child is called oinus, we find this by a female Jewess as well. So too, a minor is considered forced, and even the Rambam is of the opinion that a seduction of a minor female is not an oinus. It is not considered forced. The Chassam Sofer explains that that's by a female child that she kind of comprehends, but everyone that doesn't comprehend, her seduction is considered against her will. Therefore, the Rambam writes that even a Kohen is considered a forced issue. And he brings from the base Meir, the Rambam is the opinion that shlit is an oinus gomer. A shlit is totally forced because he has no intellect. He's not like a minor female. Even by a minor female, it would seem that one should not be stringent only when she's capable of comprehending. The Chem Yisrael, Meir Plotsky, infers in the Rambam, Nektanim Ana B'nei Mitzvahs, not Ana B'nei Videow. In Hilchos Machon Nesher, he writes, Peirush HaMeir, Apotor, they not be Videow. They don't have intellect. We see a Menoyach is not punished before 13 years and 1 day, even if he does have intellect. The Halacha, it makes a novel thought that Menoyach is not even punished till he's 20 years old because of lack of intellect.